Hi. Okay, let's start. These are two Hollywood actors. on the on the on the left, you've got Leonardo DiCaprio. He had a very, very good start. I don't know if you guys saw the movie What's Eating Gilbert Grape, where he played the part of a 14-year-old mentally challenged child. It was unbelievable. And since then, it's always Leonardo DiCaprio in whatever movie he plays, you know. And even in the role that he played, the award-winning part in The Revenant, it's still Leonardo DiCaprio angry, Leonardo DiCaprio horrified, Leonardo DiCaprio pensive, and Leonardo DiCaprio determined. On the right, you've got Christian Bale. Christian Bale is a whole other different animal, you know. Whether he's playing the part of Trevor Resnick, who's the guilty party in a hit-and-run accident and hasn't slept for 1 year because of the guilt that he experiences, or whether it's Dickie Eklund, who's the drug addict brother of a boxer who's corny and a bit foolish, whether it's Patrick Bateman, who's a serial killer, or Irving Rosenfeld, who's basically a white privilege con man. He puts on 40 pounds if he needs to. You don't see him, Dick Cheney over here, you don't see him as Christian Bale anymore because he becomes his context. He is whatever role he plays, whereas Leonardo DiCaprio is the context. The movies are made because of him. You have got someone who's a critical actor here and someone who's a Hollywood star. Japan has two famous authors. One is Haruki Murakami, and then there's Kazuo Ishiguro. Ishiguro is a very interesting fellow. If you were to put a different name on a book that he writes, you almost can't recognize whether it's the same author or not. You might not say, "Ooh, this one reminds me of Ishiguro." He changes according to the style and the way he writes. He writes with a very, very deep Japanese sensibility, depending on the context he's writing on. He was born in Japan but grew up in England his entire life. He's married to an English woman, but he writes with a true Japanese sensibility that changes subtly, nuance, and with sensitivity according to the context within which he writes. On the left, you've got Haruki Murakami, whose all his characters are Western. All his characters are Japanese. But he writes with a sensibility that's completely Western, quirky, and absurd. And you can always tell it's a Murakami book because Murakami is his context. He is iconic, and he's completely identifiable. Ishiguro is a critical writer, and Murakami is a very good commercial Japanese writer who hasn't yet achieved the heights of... And then you've got Keith Jarrett. I don't know if you guys listen to solo jazz piano. He's been argued as being the greatest improvisational jazz pianist of his entire generation. He's remarkable. Anyway, if you don't listen to piano music, he's amazing. He says that this is his greatest album, the Vienna concert, live, improvised, and where everything he did fell into place. He feels it is his best performance ever in his entire life. But this album, and the Cole concert, sold more copies of solo piano than any other album in the world. It sold 4.5 million copies, and no one ever really knew why. When he arrived at this concert, well, he was completely prepped for this one. It was completely jiving. When he arrived in Cologne for this concert, he hadn't slept for a whole day. He had just saved money on the flight that he was given money for that, and he drove down instead. The piano, the Bosendorfer piano that he was supposed to play on was broken. It was out of tune. The pedals weren't working. And he wanted to cancel the concert until someone came in. They wanted to bring in a new piano, but they couldn't because for a piano to be tuned, it takes 3 tunings over the course of 24 hours, or it always stays out of tune. So he basically didn't want to play, but when he came out and he saw how many people had bought a ticket for his performance, it was over 3,000 people. He felt he had to perform. And when he played using the broken pedal and the out-of-tune keys in accordance to how he then improvised. He allowed his broken context to influence the way in which he conducted his improvisational piece. That is his amazing performance, even though it may not have been perfect. On the one hand, you've got critical content, which is all about the way in which he already has put together the form and the content of which, and the ways in which he performs. And then on the left, you've got specific context, which is something you can't really control sometimes because it's really out of your control. It's a specific context in which he found himself in. And the powerful thing about life is when these two begin to form a powerful relationship and your critical content changes according to the context that you're in. And that's when amazing things happen. That's when you have truly critical content. Now, in a lot of the world, we don't pay attention to specific contexts because we only care about what we are already comfortable with, in which case the relationship is lost and it's no longer critical, but it becomes formal content. In line with this is something I want to talk about today regarding the first half of the theme, which is process, how it's made up of only 2 kinds in the world. One is a critical process, and the other is a manufacturing process or one of production. There are only 2 processes in all of life. One is either critical or one is manufacturing. Now, a critical process involves cellular molecular changes, or that of maybe a tree, the critical growth of a tree, which changes, as an example of a mangrove tree, according to the smallest changes in moisture content, the amount of sunlight that's given to. It's so attuned to its context, its specific context, change is affected on pure result of a degree or 2 of change of average annual temperature. Kind of the way Ishiguro addresses his writing and his work whenever he starts on a new book, or the way Christian Bale attends to his acting, where they become a conduit for their context. And of course, you've got the cold concert that Keith Jarrett played in. Then you've got manufacturing and production processes, which have to do with eliminating any kind of error or accident in the course of how it's processed. Whereas critical process, by definition, must be affected and must experience change because of all these accidents and imperfections. And with manufacturing processes, it's all about creating perfection in each and every single product, or else you'll have seconds. Seconds are not part of a manufacturing process. They're sold out cheaper. And it's all about one thing only, creating the brand. And we live in a world today where brands mean everything. It means more work. It means reputation. It means being able to identify something just from a badge, even if there's no name attached to that badge. And even when there's no badge attached to that name, you already know what it is that you're looking at because it's predicated on a certain level of quality, and perfection you have already been primed to expect. And of course, when you put them all together, you have a product. Now, it's important to separate between a process and a product. The process of critical engineering that resulted in the manufacturing process are 2 totally different things. The same way, there are 2 different kinds of products. There are products which are based on formal performance, and there are products based on critical performance. Now, these products over here, the Porsches, the Ferraris, they're designed on formal performance, meaning the ability to get to 100 kilometers an hour in the shortest space of time as possible, and the shortest amount of time it takes you to around a racetrack. Those are not critical performances, they're just formal performances. Critical performances are, do these products change the way we understand mobility? And these are not products that are designed to do that. So it's important to make that distinction too. Now, the important thing about all this is that what separates between a critical process and manufacturing processes is the fact that these are all about commercial instinct and brand. Something that has become normalized in this day and age because it's something we already expect. Actually, the light, I know that you're trying to record, but it's really bad for me, and the images are more important, and I have to see my audience. Can we turn the light down, please? I'm so sorry. You can. Thank you so much. And about the brand, sorry about that hiccup. And like Murakami and Leonardo DiCaprio, they have become their own brands because it's all about how many box office dollars they can bring and how many books they can sell. That's what they do for. So we've got critical processes and commercial instinct and brand. What does this have to do with architecture? In Chile, my friend Diego Gras tells me, if I stand here, you can see the light a bit better. My Chilean friend Diego Gras tells me there are two of the most famous Chilean architects, Matthias Klotz and Smiljan Radic, who everyone, of course, in Chile knows about. And they both do very identifiable work. Matthias Klotz does these concrete shell boxes, which are absolutely beautiful. And Smiljan Radic, well, you can't really tell what he's going to do next. He doesn't really have a style. And everyone, all the young students and Chilean architects, they want to be a Smiljan Radic. No one wants to be a Matthias Klotz because, well, they like what they don't understand. But even so, there's something both of them have in common, together with almost every famous architect in the world. Whenever they present their work in a lecture, they always present it one after another. And then I did this, and then I did this. And with all the projects they present, it's always about how the buildings develop the form and the spaces they have. And they use products to describe their process. What's wrong with that? But then again, if you want to know how an author thinks, you read the book. That's an invitation to the very soul. If you want to know how a movie director thinks, you watch their movies. What's any different then about understanding how an architect thinks? Is it good enough to attend their lectures? What is it about this which is a mystery? I'm going to talk today about process, but in a way that perhaps you might not have heard before. It's going to be uncomfortable at times, and perhaps even shocking. But the whole idea that with my own process and the way in which I process it by way of perception, designing foundations and precedents, I've discovered over the years that you can never develop a critical process of architecture through inspiration. It doesn't work. The moment you're inspired by something, you'll only imitate it. And imitation is not a process. It's a meme. And I discovered the only way you can develop a truly critical process is by being critical. That's why it's called a critical process. But we don't have these discussions in the world, in architecture. The only way to have a critical process is by being critical. And I figured after so many years, look, I'm 60 years old, it's crazy to be talking about my projects to describe my process, because firstly, it doesn't work that way, no matter how used and numbed we are by attending these conferences all the time. And I'm approaching it from a very different way, angle, and I've already used up 15 of my minutes. And it's going to take a grind, and I'm going to apologize ahead of time. I don't mean to offend anyone, but please don't run out of the room if you're getting upset. Please stay on, and I hope I will be able to present something in a way that you've not understood before. Okay, perception. Why is perception so important? Because in this day and age of global media, where we are told how to think, or at least we have been numbed into believing that that's or what things really mean, it becomes all the more important to perceive in a powerful and deeply insightful way. And that's why this is so important. And I'm going to begin with the body of the 5-year-old Syrian refugee Alian Kurdi, whose photograph was taken by Niloufer Demir of the Dogan News Agency. Now, 6 months after that, this photograph was taken of Ai Weiwei memeing the dead body of Alian Kurdi, taken by the Indian photographer Rohit Chawla. Now, the original photograph was taken in September 2015. And the black and white photograph of Ai Weiwei was taken in February 2016, 6 months later. Ai Weiwei said that he did that in order to draw awareness of the horrors of the refugee condition of what's happening in Syria. He did that to draw awareness to the horrors of the refugee condition, except that awareness of that was already made 6 months earlier by this photograph. This photograph shook the world. We were horrified and we were made aware of it already. So what was Ai Weiwei really doing there? And I was asking myself what this really meant. And I finally discovered, when I discovered what it was all about, it shocked me at first, and then I began to think more about it, and I realized it was all about being seen. That everything Ai Weiwei does is about being seen next to other artists, being seen next to curators and other refugees, and about blood being lost by being mistreated by the Chinese government, photographs of him being impoverished, and it's all about this, isn't it? And this is a cartoon done by the Indian cartoonist Uday Mohite, showing gifts being given to the needy, and a selfie be taken of that. And upon digging even deeper, I realized that throughout his entire career, Ai Weiwei has used destruction, death, the horrors of tragedy, and loss as his calling card for his art. He doesn't use his art to draw awareness to the horrors of the human condition. He uses the horrors of the human condition to draw attention to his art. And it's so pervasive, it's become normalized. We think that social activism and art can go together. It doesn't. You're either a social activist or you're an artist. If you're an artist, you are using horror to make your art important. And in this exhibition, where in Sichuan, where 80,000 people died, 25,000 of which were school children, he created this exhibition. These were all the school bags of the dead school children. He bought new ones, and he created this phrase in Chinese from a grieving mother, which basically says, and she was only 7 years old, she will never see what the world was all about. And he recorded all these names of the dead people because he said the Chinese government wasn't doing so. Now, this is, in a way, a big lie. The Chinese government was praised by the United Nations when this earthquake happened, because just 3 days after it happened, they called in for aid from every part of the world in order to help them make things good. It was the first time in Chinese history they opened the doors to everyone, no questions asked, and they were lauded for it. They themselves did not know how many people died, let alone what their names were. And Ai Weiwei was there, going on and on about how the Chinese government wasn't answering his phone calls. He had to do this. No, the Chinese government's bad, and all that. And you know what? You go to his website for this exhibition, and that's the first page, his face. Looking underneath the brow of his cap, the Chinese government's bad. And when you go to his Facebook page, there's Ai Weiwei conflating himself with community and the food. And look at the back of his head there with the Newsweek magazine, associating brand with brand. That's Niloufer Demir. You never recognize her, of course. You don't even know her name, right? And she, with the body of Alian Kurdi. We live in a world today where being seen has become the default of what social media has given us access to. We all want to be seen. It's the most important thing in the world. Why? Because being seen contributes to popularity. And popularity is the cornerstone of form. Meme form, already recognized as being good or bad or whatever, you take sides with it, and then you become more famous because you're supporting a cause which is already known and that you can be lauded for. On the other hand, you have seeing. And seeing is the cornerstone of self-discovery because you only discover who you are, which is really what we all are in life all about, when we see what the world's all about. And with that comes critical content, the ability to form your own understanding of what your responsibility to the planet is and how that serves the relationships that it takes in order to create a better society and a better culture for ourselves. And it's all about the specificity of the context within which you are trying to create better awareness and seeing about. And it's all about society. Popularity, the memeing of form, and being seen, on the other hand, is all about your reputation. What we are taught about in schools, and our parents, and their parents' parents, that once you've lost your reputation, you've lost everything. There's no bigger lie in the history of the planet than this. Your reputation means nothing if you don't understand what responsibility you serve. And it's all about the objectification of the forms you're trying to meme in order to create disconnection from the context. You're not trying to make a relationship, you're trying to disconnect it so that attention is not brought to that situation, it's brought to you. Popularity, yeah? And it's all about you as the individual. That's what becomes important. Now, I'll be focusing on these themes of relationships, context and content, critical content, objectification, disconnection, and form as we go along. But let me move on because I'm gonna not have time if I don't. Designing. What is designing? We have got the beautiful buildings we create, tall entrances to mass rapid transit stations, houses in concrete, shells in timber vaults, rammed earth walls. We've got the interiors and all the details that goes into that, all of that lovely texture and light and materiality. We've got the tools and the materials and the techniques that it takes to achieve and accomplish all that. And finally, the tools, whether it's carpentry or heavier equipment, that it takes to accomplish all this. And then on the other hand, we've got the world of Miss Universe. Oh, shocking. How can you draw this comparison? Is there any, yeah? But let's look at Miss Universe. Firstly, it's about the ballroom gown and the catwalk thing, and really how little clothes you can begin to wear as you go along. And finally, you know, legs. It's rarely known that Miss South Africa in 1 year won on sole account of how long her legs were. And then you've got, of course, what do you want to do for society? Oh, I want to create alleviation of suffering and hunger in Ethiopia or some third world country. And we laugh at them. We go, my God, you know, how shallow. Architecture, we were way beyond that, yes? We are not about beauty and Miss Universe contests. But do you have any idea how much effort and passion goes into the creation of this? Let's take a little bit of a deep dive, yeah? Firstly, if you are already an experienced catwalk model of at least 2 years, it takes you at least 6 months to begin to qualify for Miss Universe competition. Because you need to know how to walk and refine that walk if you already know how to walk. If you don't, if you're starting from scratch, it takes you 3 years to participate in Miss Universe. Why? Because you got to practically relearn how to walk in order to put one foot in front of another on stilettos and walk so that your hips sway. It is an art. Secondly, you got to learn how to stand and to create posture, to create a solid back. 1 year of yoga at the very minimum. You got to learn poise in order to balance yourself and your head as you're walking so you don't jerk down the catwalk because you're wearing high heels. Then there's a whole regimen of increasing the strength of your core muscles. And that is just mind-numbingly difficult. And never mind the diet. We've not even gotten into the types of skin of the human species. There are 6 different types of skin tones in the world. There's fair, light, medium, olive, tan, brown, and deep. 7 different types. But the Pantone Color Company has 110 different colors of foundation for your skin. If you're not sure, you always go for 1 or 2 shades darker, and then when you build it up, you will be beautiful, and what is made up of your face will match with your natural skin tone. If you are very sure and you're an expert at foundation colors, you will judge based on the specific complexion of your client. Yeah? I'm missing something. Yes, color theory. There's hue, there's tint, there's tone, and there's shade. Hue is the basic color. Tint is how much white you put to the color. Tone is how much gray you put to the color. And shade is how much black you put to the color. So all this is based on color theory and your ability to be a colorist. It takes years to study this to be good enough to help Miss Universe begin to compete. And we've not even gotten to hair. So let's take a deep dive into hair. Oh, hairstylists, how dare you? How dare you talk about hairstyling with architects? We are a critical profession. Do you know how difficult hair is? Let's take a deep dive into hair. Firstly, there are 3 different standard types of curlers, irons. There are curling irons, there are straightening irons, and there are, what's the last one? Darn. Look it up. I did, I forgot. Combs. You know how many different types of combs there are? You've got pintail combs, which are also called teasing combs. You've got pick combs, you've got detangling combs, you've got cushion brushes, you've got the material of what these are made of matter. Plastic ones are the most used, but they're cheap. That's why they're the most used. The most important types of brushes or combs are made of bristle brush, because bristle brush is the only material that's able to spread oil evenly through your scalp. Yeah? And then you've got scissors. Do you know how many different kinds of scissors there are? They're firstly short-bladed, and then they're long-bladed scissors. Long-bladed scissors do big, very stable to handle. They do big cutting jobs. Short-bladed, all for fine-tuning. And then you've got swivel handle, the handles. You've got standard handles, which are immediately symmetrical. You've got offset handles. And you've got crane handles. Why? Because the more offset there is, the more comfortable you can use it as a stylist, and the longer you can go on cutting hair without getting tired. And then you've got the type of blade. Different blades are different. You've got thinning blades. My texturizing thinning blades, which put the teeth very close to each other, only on one side of the blade, the other one is still a sharp blade, in order to thin gradually. You've got chunking blades, which space the teeth wider to take up bigger chunks of hair. And then we've got, a special kind of comb with a missing tine. What is that for? That's in the event the hair is not too long and you can use it as a teasing comb without having to drop your comb to pick up a pintail, yeah? And then we've got the different types of hair and the wild ways in which you've got four different types of hair. You got straight hair, you got wavy hair, you got curly hair, and you got coiled hair. Within each category, there are 3 different categories. You've got 12 different manifestations of the same material. And then you've got the techniques. The woman out there, you will know what this is all about because hair is different for every single human being on earth. And should we go to that, the different types of techniques? There's scissor over comb. That's the easiest, to use the comb to stabilize how you cut, okay? There's club cutting. There's texturizing. There's thinning. There's curl cutting. At the highest levels, you do freehand. And freehand runs a thread through all the other cutting forms. Under texturizing, which is a finishing technique, there's point cutting. There's returnal cutting. There is slide cutting, and there is coil cutting, twist cutting. It is complex beyond your belief. And finally, the kinds of shampoos you use, depending on what kind of oil content and pH content your hair is all about. And then you've got, of course, the doyens of the styling world. You've got Encore Tran, you've got Chris Appleton, Chris Middleton, Sam McKnight, Sam McKnight, Ted Gibson, and Ursula Stephen. These people didn't just happen overnight. It took them years of trial and error and failure and then some success to get to exactly where they were, where they're serving the brightest movie stars on earth. They know their hair and they know their color. So, in the hairstyling world, you've got the standard hairstyling salon, you've got the slightly more elevated boutique, you've got exclusivity, and you've got the real high-end boutique hair salons. You've got the doyens of the styling world. I had to throw in Ursula Stevens there, you know, for gender parity. You've got the techniques and the materials with which they use, and you've got the products of their endeavors. In the architecture world, you've got the standard commercial office, you've got something slightly more elevated, exclusive offices, and you've got the boutique firm. You've got the doyens of the architecture world. I had to throw in Wang Shu there for racial parity. You've got the techniques and the materials that we use to create our designs, and you've got our products. What's the difference? Oh, you'll argue, architecture has got utility and function. Do you know the Sydney Opera House doesn't really work? To create the shelves, the stage in front was so narrow, they had to hire big bodyguards at the end to catch the ballerinas because they ran out of space. Acoustically, they had to put in a whole new skin inside. So what are you talking about regarding use and function? Is there any difference between the hairstyling world and the architecture world? Okay. If you can take a minute right now, God, I'm really running out of time, Brian, I'm in trouble. If you can take a minute right now and picture in your mind the most adored, the most critically published house in the world, inseparable from nature. Keep it in your mind. Do you have this house in your mind? Now, all at once, say this name. Not so many, but it is Falling Water, isn't it? And Pei, please pardon me for this. I did not know what you were going to. So we have Falling Water, Bear Run, Pennsylvania, 1937. Let's talk about Falling Water, the most famous house in the world with the amazing cantilevers that you had already seen in Pei's slide. And what is Falling Water all about? Now let's look at what the owner's son said about it. The owner never gave interviews about it, by the way. He hated the house. But let's see what Edgar Kaufman Jr. said and what the architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, said, yeah? Firstly, Edgar Kaufman, he said, house and site together form the very image of man's desire to be at one with nature, equal and wedded to nature. And architecture which conformed to nature would conform to what was basically people. So you've got nature repeated many times. His iconic section. Now, do you see something missing in this section? Let me help you. These are sections done by a Czech student which show what is missing in Frank Lloyd Wright's drawings. It's the opposite bank. Except that these drawings aren't really accurate. These drawings are taken closer to where the bridge entry is. The actual section runs like this, closer to the cantilever. Yeah? Now, what's not often known is that when you study this section in plan, that's the house, that's the river, that's the cantilever. What's not known is when Frank Lloyd Wright was designing this house, on the opposite bank was filled with a forest of trees. That's exactly what it's all about. And when you look at it in summer, the thickness of those leaves and the boughs prevented any light from falling to the house because the sun was basically overhead. In winter, when the sun is really low, the forest is so thick, no light gets down there either because of the extent of the cantilever. What that means is, at every time of the day, except for one moment in winter, when the sun is low enough to go between the tree trunks, do you get a little bit of light there for 1.5 hours maybe a week out of an entire year. But that also, the rest of the time, it's in complete darkness, wedded to nature. What that means is, underneath of that cantilever is some of the most abysmal conditions you can possibly imagine, unless it floods, in which case that relationship is completely lost. But you basically walk down that little flight of stairs down to this condition, a bit like a sewer, isn't it? The point is, anything that's in shadow, the moment you put an umbrella over grass, the grass ceases to grow. The moment you have a concrete slab over nature, all life underneath that slab is reduced to homogeneous kind of life, which is an abomination of nature. So house and site sit together to form the very image of man's desire to be one with nature, equal and wedded to nature. That's not necessarily true. Nice from far, far from nice. Because you only understand your impact in nature where you interface nature, not when you look at it from 2 miles away or 250 meters away. And then we have, the architect said, the good building is not one that hurts the landscape, but one which makes the landscape more beautiful than it was before the building was built. Study nature, love it, stay close to nature. It will never fail you. What is he talking about? You can put, oh, wait a minute, landscape and nature. There is a distinction, isn't there? Landscape may not be nature. Nature may not necessarily be landscape. What is this all about? It's about this. You can throw falling water into a slum, it doesn't make the slum any more beautiful. Your architecture does not make your context more beautiful. Don't kid yourselves about it. On the other hand, you can put a slum in nature and it suddenly looks more beautiful because it's in nature. Nature, of course, it will never fail you. It can't. It will always make your building more beautiful. So Frank Lloyd right there is conflating nature with the landscape. The whole point is, that's a landscape. This is nature. But he fooled you because you did not critically question it. He fooled me for years. So there in a beautiful forest was a solid high rock ledge rising beside a waterfall, and the natural thing to do seemed to be to cantilever the house from that rock bank. What is this all about? This is it. That's a plan of falling water, ground floor, upper floor. These are the sandstone rocks that stood on the edge that he built his house into to anchor it and the cantilever. That's the house, that's the river. That's the upper cantilever of the terrace roof. Now what happens is when you put a huge slab like that over an unprotected area of the river, open to the sky during summer, sun path diagrams. Summer, winter. Winter, really low sun, so it only gets in there early in the morning on winter, hardly gets there, maybe 15 minutes over a certain months. And in summer, the sun is directly overhead. Now what happens when you put a slab there is it completely heats up during the summer. And all that heat gets drawn into the master bedroom and right through the living room underneath. It was unusable in the middle of summer. They never used it in summer. They only use it during the spring break and times over autumn in order to entertain guests. In winter, the opposite happens. It becomes a refrigerator because of that same slab. Frank Lloyd Wright designed a tropical massing for a house that belongs in the temperate zone. You don't spread a house out in winter, opening to the cold wind or the hot summer sun in the temperate zone. But that's exactly what he did. And then the lower cantilever over here. In order to support that cantilever and the one above it, off of those two columns, he had to dig right into the bedrock to create that massive structural system. He cut right through the stones to create that in order to support the length, the depth of that cantilever, and that's what it looks like at the time it was being built. Just to give you an idea of scale, I've photoshopped the Kaufman family into that. It is a huge structure. Now, sandstone cantilevers take 100,000 years to create naturally. A concrete cantilever takes 2 years. Not very natural, is it? But never mind that. We're just beginning to get started. So, that was where Edgar Kaufman, the client, originally wanted to put his house. Why? Why did Edgar Kaufman want to put his house there? Because that site right there, from that bank, looking back up to the waterfall, is exactly where the family bathed during summer, right there. That's where they bathed. He wanted the house there so that he could look up to where they'll be bathing during summer. Not unreasonable, right? Completely denied. So what happened was this. And by extraction, all that, you see that bedrock? That's right there, yeah? And so you cut up all that stone. Rock's not really nature, is it? Cut up all that stone, insert all your structure, and then let some of it pop out because, you know, it's natural. That is an appropriation of nature to make your house feel good. It's not about respecting nature, is it? And then you bend your concrete beam around a tree as though that tree is the most precious thing in the world. Slightly hypocritical. When after all that has been done, that becomes the respect for nature. So no, I'm sorry, it's not very natural to cantilever the house. I want you to live with the waterfall, not just to look at it, but for it to become an integral part of your lives. What does he mean by that? This is Barron before falling water. Now, that's where the Kaufman family bathed in the summers. They were already living with it. But no, they never bathed there again. We'll get into that in a moment why. And so, Frank Lloyd Wright was asked by Mrs. Kaufman to build her a swimming pool. And so he did. Let me show you where that swimming pool is. You're walking by that bridge over, you cross over that bridge, you look over that bridge, and that's where he put the pool. Now, the Kaufmans would bathe in the nude during summer. Obviously not the best place to bathe nude because your guests coming in, strangers even, viral touristing, would look right into where your breasts are hanging out. So that pool was never used, obviously. So she asked for Frank Lloyd Wright to build her a guest house with a pool further up the hill. Why? Because she could not live in the house either. It was too hot in summer and too cold in winter, even as a weekend. So he built them a new guest house, and this is where the guest house were. You cross over a bridge further back at the driveway behind the house. You walk up the stair over these lovely little, this lovely concrete shaded roof. You get to a little entrance to the guest house. You walk along the terrace, and the pool is right at the end. The pool where Lillian finally bathed in 100 meters away from where they used to bathe, from where they originally had the life of the lived with the pool. And this is falling water before falling water. Can you imagine 2 years after you're bathing there that you have this? Now, this is not photoshopped. This is. That's the actual thing. And you don't really know what's about until you really are Edgar Kaufman. Well, that makes sense. But still doesn't explain why they never bathe there again. Because usually when you bathe in a waterfall, you're not bathing looking at the waterfall. You're bathing with the waterfall behind you, right? So why? The reason is because Frank Lloyd Wright didn't understand really what nature is all about. Now, this is the actual Falling Waterfalls. It's in Arkansas, spilling over the exact same type of stone, sandstone ledges, and it's a beautiful waterfall. Now, you might notice that this tree has got these pieces of wood nailed to it, and it's got this, you see that little green rope there? Now, what is that for? That's because people climb up over that. They get to the top of the waterfall, they jump in with their dogs, with their friends, with their family. It's really used, and in the middle of summer, it is a fun fair. It is just crazy. People up there under the sun, checking out people jumping in, and people jumping in, being checked out by people and friends. It's all about spectating and participating. Waterfalls in the history of human participation has been, in the human existence, has been about participating and spectating. participating, and spectating. Now, what happened is falling water already had that element of participating and spectating. And the spectators are never up there. This is too high to jump from. Each and every waterfall has its specific context. And each and every waterfall has its specific way of being participated in and spectating from. In the case of Bear Run, it was at the bottom of it because that was too high. You couldn't enjoy the waterfall. It was all about at the base of it with them here looking back. Now, would you like to look back at that? And this is the reason why they never used it again. They never bathed there again because Frank Lloyd Wright didn't understand this element of spectating and participating, because cantilevering directly over the fall eliminates any possible relationship to that by way of which humans are comfortable with. And this is what he gave them instead, a little stair down to a ledge, which no one ever goes there. That door is always locked. No one ever comes down here because there's no relationship to that. And this is the kicker. You would not want to go down there because that's what you're fronted with. And finally, a few times a year, 3 times a year, falling waterfalls goes dry. And when it goes dry, it's still an amazing place. Why? Because all that sunlight drips into that amazing grotto. This is what falling water is like when it runs dry. Don't visit it during those months. Now, what Franklin Toker and William Curtis have said about it, I know, I'm running out of time. Oh, sorry, camera. Now, what Franklin Toker said, he referred to falling water as having a delicate synthesis of nature and the built environment, and the contouring of the house into cantilevered ledges responds so sympathetically to the rock strata of the stream banks that it does make Bear Run a more wondrous landscape than it was before. Not necessarily so, yes, once you get close. So that's an untruth. What has William Curtis said about it? A superficial reading of Wright's achievement might point to the hovering horizontals in cream colors and to the bands of glazing with metal frames and claim he was there being influenced by the simplifications of the international style, falling into the facile, shallow, stylistic characterizations warned about earlier in his book, that one. For not only were the forms rooted in Wright's earlier principles and discoveries, i.e., landscape terraces, terracing, extended levels and base elements of the prairie houses, pervasive stratification, they were also infused with meanings and associations opposite to the philosophical precepts of the European avant-garde. And then he celebrated the specifically American obsession with the free life lived in nature, an idea rich in pioneer mythology and ennobled by the transcendentalist writings of Thoreau and Emerson. Who are Thoreau and Emerson? Let's look at Emerson first. Emerson wrote these books. Now, don't take my word for it, you can read them, but everything that's written in these books are demonstrated and illustrated with the covers. They are about leaves, autumn, tree roots, a worm's eye view of trees, men, single men in columns, in canoes in a misty pond, and camping. Not exactly the same thing as a 4-story building with flushing toilets, is it? What is Thoreau about? Thoreau was the guy who learned a lot from Emerson, and he wrote this amazing book called Life in the Woods, where he spent one entire year of 4 seasons in a tiny hut fending for himself. And this is the tiny hut that he stayed in. It's incredibly small. You walk in, there's a little table on one side, a writing desk, a bed, and at the end of that, a fireplace where he cooked his fish. Not exactly tantamount to that sort of a 4-story scale, is it? So this is another untruth. There's absolutely no relationship between the writings of Thoreau and Emerson and falling water. William Curtis was conflating literature with architecture incorrectly. And he said it was about the fusion of structure, function, and idea, and on the inspiration of natural forms. The fusion of structure and idea. Not necessarily so. The cantilevers were served it badly during summer and winter. And function, no one ever really wanted to use it. It was too warm. an idea. What was the idea? The idea was a relationship to nature which would be transcendentalist. That doesn't exist. And an inspiration of natural forms. They were already inspired by those natural forms. They were denied that inspiration. So what is this about that Curtis is writing about? What is it that he's trying to say about falling water? Hovering horizontals in cream colors, isn't it? The style bells are glazing with metal frames, because that's all it is. And if we study what he meant by falling into the facile stylistic characterization warned early in this book, it is this. In one version of revivalism, I will let you read that. Yeah, take a photograph of it. I've run out of time actually, but it's all about forms and context, whether the form fits the context. Nothing to do with deeper critical content or critical process. That he made the mistake of talking about how we copied externals without reproducing the core qualities. It's all about this, isn't it? A superficial reading and about styles, using context to show off your form. Because we live today in an age where the three manifestations of beauty, aesthetics, and style belong to one God, that of form. Leaving critical content completely ignored. Now, even if architecture and falling water were all and only about beauty. Let's look at some images I have here. This is falling water, bear run before, bear run after. Bear run before, bear run after. After and before. And then look at these images. These are sepia photographs of bear run before falling water was built. And this is the part of the riverine system around Bear Run itself. And they all belong to a bigger riverine system that's part of the Ohiopyle, the Youghiogheny riverine system, which is in the heart of Ohiopyle National Forest. Yeah? You've got Sugar Run Falls, you've got Upper and Lower Jonathan Run Falls, you've got Factor Falls, and you've got the most amazing Cucumber Falls. And of course, the Ohiopyle Falls. Now, what would you do if someone commissioned you to build a house on top of this waterfall? Because that's exactly what Frank Lloyd Wright did. It was featured in Global Architecture magazine, the iconic pornographic magazine of the architectural, the one that all of us want to belong to. And I can make my own cover too. You see, the moment you eliminate all of context, you can get a cover of an award-winning project. Let's go back to that again. Eliminate context. Don't care about it. You can be an award-winning architect. So, just to round up on this section on design, you've got falling water after, before, the family, and them together. This is what Smiljan Radic and Matthias Klotz have in common. They talk about architecture like it's something very important, but like Frank Lloyd Wright, they are only referring to form and space, style, beauty, and aesthetics. Something that all of us are quite familiar with too, but it's okay. We are all friends. We are not perfect. It's time we have more discussions about these. Let's move on. Do you need me to stop here, Brian? Okay. So we got foundations. Now, what is it about foundations? We've got famous architects that meme nature. We've got famous artists that meme dead children. What do we meme? Now, what is a meme, firstly? It is an image, blah, 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 carrying symbolic meaning, copied, spread by associated culture with slight variations, an element of culture or system behavior passed from the keywords here. Symbolic meaning, copied and spread, slight variations by imitation. Non-genetic means, meaning no association with context. Memes succeed on the key basis of ignoring context entirely and assuming the same solitary relationship every time, the relationship of pure imitation, okay? And then I Googled this. I Googled round bubble buildings, and I found this in Pinterest. And then I Googled tall, many skinny columns, and I found this on Pinterest. Stacked cube architecture, Pinterest. Collective square windows, Pinterest. This has become our default of social design, hasn't it? That we meme stuff we see, we copy, we follow. And then I Googled brick, concrete, metal, and tropics, and this is what I got. Looks really familiar, doesn't it? And then you've got not just the names of the architecture we do, we've also got these names of things that have begun to become memes themselves. We've got community represented by houses that are turned into coffee shops to inconvenience all the neighbors that live around them because they're in residential neighborhoods. We've got community gardens that the community living there did not ask for, that invites the whole viral tourist crowd of Malaysia to visit. You've got public space that doesn't care about the actual community of Chelsea, the High Line in New York. All of the people that used to live there don't live there anymore. They can't stand it. Even the New Yorkers don't go there. 3,600 visitors every day. That public space is public space for the viral tourist globe, isn't it? It's not for New Yorkers anymore. You've got sustainability, the Makoko Floating School, which collapsed. 1 week after it was awarded a Silver Bear at the Venice Biennale. No discussion of that. Not very sustainable. Art and social activism. We've got Ai Weiwei memeing their children. Removing barriers between people. And this is where we put our homemaids in a room so small, you don't even want to put your dog or your cat in there. And of course, we've got the delicate synthesis of nature and the built environment, yes? So we live lives of words and architecture of memes today in every single sense of the word. And what is the problem with this? To meme is to follow. Now, is this a good foundation for what we want to see the world to be? What is a good foundation? And I thought a good foundation can be found in the act of mountain climbing, yes? Now, there's mountain climbing in only two ways. There's alpine style, and there is commercial style. Commercial style didn't begin like that. It began as something called expedition style, where you got a pyramid structure, a lot of people at the bottom, slowly withering down till you've got just a group of 2 to 6 people right on top. That's expedition style. It's now become commercial style. Now, what is alpine style all about? Alpine style is about understanding that your summit is not there for you to make a goal. It's only there for you to guide your next 10 steps. Because if you have climbed mountains, you will know that if you save the energy for 1 step every 10 steps, by the time you get up to the top of Mount Everest, you have energy for 2,200 additional steps, which will bring you back down to safety. That's what climbing is all about. It's knowing that if you walk this way around a rock from a lower point, you save energy on 1 step because that side, which is more in the shade, is going to be harder, icier. You will struggle and use more energy to get to the same place. Climbing mountains is not about summiting mountains. It's about understanding how to climb. And in the best scenarios, the alpine style only happens at the maximum of a group of 3 people. It can be pushed about 5 or 6, which is the size of a small architecture firm, but the most amazing adventures take place with just 1 or 2 people. In 2017, the climbers Kenro Nakajima and Kazuya Hiraide, they conquered the northeast face of Shispara, which is a 7,500 meter peak, by conceptualizing an entirely new route that required so much expertise of changing the way they climbed it. They learned a new way to climb, and they pioneered an entirely new route to the summit. Now, with the best climbers in the world, summiting is not gets them winning awards. It's pioneering a new route. And when they fail, they always fail on the way up. When they die, they always fail or die on the way up because they're attempting something that's never been done before. With commercial climbing and expedition climbing, it starts in the same way. You've got a dirty base camp. You've got these Sherpas that bring all your stuff up. And then on the day itself, you form a line and you follow the same footsteps as a person right in front of you. You get to camp 2, camp 3, and then you finally end up in at the top. And then you make your push for the summit, and you're just following someone else in front of you. It begins to remind you of what we do in architecture, right? We follow because it's the easiest way to summit. The reason is because, furthermore, you're not really doing the work. All of these guys look the same, but you can't tell between the clients and the Sherpas because the Sherpas have these things which weigh up to 100 pounds inside their knapsacks, so they all look the same. They're carrying all your load for you. You're not doing much work as a member of an expedition or a commercial climb, yeah? And the whole objective is to, let's go on to these guys. You've heard a bit about that already. I got slides mixed up, but never mind. With alpine climbing, the whole objective is not to get to the summit. The whole objective is to understand what the process of climbing is, of what the process of design is. Now, you've seen this drawing before. It's called a door and window schedule. When you put so many doors and windows on one drawing, your objective is to finish that drawing, isn't it? What I do is I put one door and one window on one sheet of paper. When there's only one thing there, that's the only thing you have got to do, and you put more attention to designing it. You learn more about the act of design. And then as architects, that's all we care about because that's what we want to take photographs of. That's our summit. And we make that the goal, right? And what happens is then, because of that, we miss out all these other things that are important. So with commercial climbing, your objective is to get to the summit. Why? Because that's the photograph you want to see on the summit. Do you know where most people die when they're climbing a mountain, commercially? Mount Everest, say? 95% of people on Mount Everest die on the way back down, after they've summited. The reason is, when you're focused on making the summit your goal, you will use every ounce of energy to get to the top, which leaves you nothing to come back down with. You don't understand the details of climbing, the same way you don't understand the details of designing. And when you get there, as architects, that's what we do, don't we? It's all about the post. It's all about the product, because that's what gets you seen. It's what gets you popular. It's what boosts your reputation. And then when you get to a really high level, you get featured in really, you don't even need to read the name. You know that's Design Architecture Daily, yeah? To be featured, that's the goal. That's the summit. Now, you know, when people are really successful people, you know, they always talk about they succeeded, they've done everything, they've summited everything, they feel empty. You know why they feel empty? Because they've left the lifeless body of their creativity just below the summit of their success. They are creatively dead, and their virtual bodies are still. Consciously, they've come down from the summit of success. Subconsciously, there's nothing left in there. There's an emptiness. Anthony Bourdain committed suicide at the height of his career because what the world saw of him was more important than how he saw himself. And that's what social media does when you make that your summit. That's what fame does when you make that your goal. So, there are two different, vastly different ways of doing it. There are two extremes. You can do alpine style. You can do commercial expedition style. Architecture is not one option. And to decide what you want to be, you don't start by measuring yourself against this. You start measuring yourself against the highest possible achievement it means to understand what design is, or climbing. Yeah? Finally, we've got precedents, and this is really quick and short. Case studies, precedent studies, you know. I've done more than 300, between 300 and 350 projects with my students over the last 20 years, and I've discovered not one of the projects I have studied with my students are actual critical works of architecture, which is shocking. And I would not have known this if I hadn't studied it. And how many of us actually study architecture critically? And I'm not talking about petty failures like, oh, it's too expensive, or it went over budget, or even if it structurally failed. I'm talking the same philosophical failures that I just showed you in Falling Water, that we all, hopefully, once worshipped and iconized. This is a shocking revelation in architecture, and I would like to encourage you to look into it further. The Jewish Museum by Daniel Libeskind, it's a Jewish museum. He reduced the expression to a single point in the history of the Jewish culture where they had absolutely no control over their destiny. If I was Jewish, I would be insulted beyond belief. And yet that building is famous and continues to be adored by everyone. Let's not even talk about the rest, you know. Like the bird's nest, a toilet seat to Beijing, and even in form. So we got all of that in order to be featured, to be famous, to be seen by the world. That's not true. That's not Falling Water. That's what I photoshopped. That's the actual image. We are so easy to fool because architecture media will grind that thumbscrew of numbness right through your head till you don't know what's right and what's wrong anymore because you don't know how to perceive in a way which is critical. Yeah? Don't let that happen to you. So these are some of the projects I've studied. From Therm Vals by Zumthor, right down to the Fuji Kindergarten by Tezuka Architects. And every single one of them have critical, philosophical, or conceptual failures. So we got all of that. And I'd just like to end with a simple parable called The Seashell and the Sea. There were once two architects as a way forward, you know, so that you're not left in the depths of depression. There were once two architects who asked to design different phases of the same aquarium. And the first architect asked, what is my aquarium going to look like? And she was inspired by the form of the Nautilus seashell. Upon dissecting it, found it was arranged around the spiral of the Fibonacci series with all these amazing tanks of different sizes going to the smallest ones in the middle. And upon graphically depicting it, found you could access circulation on the outer spiral, visit all these amazing tanks of different sizes as you're going to the smallest forms of marine life, and you could exit on the inner spiral. And it became an amazing building, looking pretty much and feeling pretty much like a bloody seashell. The second architect instead asked, what is an aquarium? And she found it was about the sea. And then she asked, what is the sea? And found it was about high tides and low tides. She found it was about the most luminous shallows of the Maldives and the deepest shadows of the Mariana Trench, about the most delicate ecosystems on Earth and the most powerful forces on the planet. She found it was about sunrises and sunsets and the food chain. And her aquarium became beyond a single name. It opened on many days of the week before the sun rose, closed on many days of the week after the sun set. It had tanks so shallow, children could walk in them and feel fish nibbling at their feet. It had tanks so deep, you had to take an elevator 300 meters down to understand the true meaning of the word pressure. It had tanks that exhibited the weather outside and rose and fell with the falling and rising of the tides. Every time I'm stuck, it's because I'm inspired by something that is about a bloody form and I want to imitate it. And when I really stuck, I try to focus on questions instead, because questions are what provoke relationships and educate us about critical content and not just about stylish form. And I'd like to leave you on that note. Style, design, one's about questions, one's about answers, form, content, relationships, objects, reputation, responsibility, so on and so forth. I hope you got as much out of it as I did preparing it. Thank you very much. Sorry for boring you beyond the time I was given.